Hi guys, it is Aoife from Fred Weasley Died Laughing, and I'm here to do a book review for you guys today. So I'm going to be reviewing Mageborn by Jessica Thorne today, and I received this book in exchange for an honest review via NetGalley from the publishers. I was really happy to receive this book. I have read a few of Jessica Thorne's books before, under the Jessica Thorne name and under her other name that she writes under, which is Ruth Frances Long, and I've talked a few about those books in the past. And Jessica Thorne / Ruth Frances Long is also an Irish author, and I love to throw my support behind Irish authors as often as I can, so I'm really delighted to be able to review this one today. So Mageborn is a young adult fantasy book set in a really interesting world where there are some people who are born with types of magical powers, and there can be different types of magical powers. They are known as the Mageborn, and people can have different different types of powers, such as fire power, wind power, mind control or coercion power. Loads of these different types of powers that can often be used, for the wrong things. And we are following a character called Grace, who is a soldier within this world, under this kingdom, and her job is to basically capture the Mageborn who are doing bad, who aren't under the control of the crown, because Mageborn by law have to be under control of the crown, and they are controlled by the Lord of Thorns, which is a member of the royal family, who also has these magical powers, but his magical powers are really, really special and very, very powerful in the fact that he's able to control and help all of the Mageborn in his kingdom. At the start of this book, we are following Grace as she is on the hunt for a particular Mageborn who is just doing really, really bad crimes, and through this particular investigation that she is undergoing, she ends up coming into contact properly with the Lord of Thorns, whose name is Bastian, and they've never really communicated before, but she's heard all the rumours about Bastian. She has heard that he's terrible, that he's evil, and all these different things. Meaning to, Bastian ends up kind of coming along with her on her investigation, and she ends up getting to know him a lot better, and they also end up seeing that there are some really bad corruption in the kingdom itself, within the royal family, because the king is sick, and there seems to be some people who are planning some really terrible things once the king passes away and there's no proper heir to take over the throne. Bastian's life could be in danger because of that, because he is the direct heir. So Grace ends up, against kind of her better judgment, taking control of Bastian's protection, and ends up being his chief kind of security guard in a way. Herself, Bastian, and Grace's group of her team, her group of soldiers that are with her, end up on this adventure that will end up on this mission to not only kind of save the kingdom from a possibly corrupt leader, and also save all the Mageborn, because they are actually under this leader. They actually are probably the most vulnerable, and they could actually be in real trouble. There's a lot more to this book than that explanation. That's kind of one of the easiest ways I can, but I would say to go and look at the summary on Goodreads as well, because this is a fantasy world, and sometimes fantasy worlds, particularly with in-depth magic systems like this book has, they're sometimes hard to explain properly in a way that you really want to grasp a reader's attention. But I will say that this book definitely has all the elements of a great fantasy book, the fantasy books that I've read in the past and really love. It seems to have a really set a really good setting, in there is a very developed city. We have the kingdom, we have the royal areas where kind of the highborn people live, there is the where the soldiers live, and then there's also kind of the docks, the ships, the pubs, the kind of the more slum-like areas, the poorer areas, areas where people tend not to go, and there are loads of shady characters as well that kind of come in and out of the mix and communicate with our main characters. So we kind of get an inkling here and there of how other areas work, and the hierarchy there that isn't just to do with the royal family. One thing I love about this book as well is that the characters are actually all in their 20s. I did say this is YA fantasy. I think it reads more on the YA fantasy kind of scene than adult fantasy. The characters themselves are in their 20s, or 22, 23, no older than 25 I don't think, but I really enjoy the fact that they're older. And for me, particularly, even when I'm reading characters who are supposed to be 16 or 17, sometimes in my head I'm reading them as older. I'm reading them as 24 or 25, and that's just because I'm older now, so the characters are more in age with me when I'm reading them now, and because they're also in kind of really mature situations that not a normal teenager would be in. So yeah, I really like the fact that these were actually older characters, and it felt believable that they would be in the position that they are in, and they weren't just these child prodigies that became captains when they were 16, which isn't always that believable. The male character in this Bastian, who is known as the Lord of Thorns, quite an intriguing character. We hear a lot of things about him, how he's evil, and you know, people should look out for him because, you know, he could do anything to you. He, you know what, just wants to kill people or use up their powers. And Grace is definitely really, really scared of him when she first meets him, and there is this real power within him because he has a lot of magic, and a magic that is normally not a lot more rigidly controlled in this kingdom. He's the only one that has, I think, as much control as he does over his own magic. So he's quite an interesting character, and for me he was a little bit of a mix between the Darkling. At first he seemed a little bit like the Darkling, and then he was a little bit more Carden as well, because he's also, not only is he this really magical being and he's kind of dark and handsome in that as well, he is also a kind of a prince of this royal family. So he has the kind of the airs and graces of someone who's grown up in royalty and sometimes expects people to do what he says, and has a little bit of that kind of privilege to him as well, and that sometimes makes him a little bit dislikable. Underneath all of that, even though there is this exterior that he's this hard guy who, you know, is really scary, he's actually a massive soft boy underneath, which I kind of did enjoy. There's times where I wondered, there did seem to be a slight discrepancy slightly with what people thought of him and what we were being shown of him, but I think that's good as well in terms of, I really kind of like the flip in this book as well, where Grace was kind of almost a stronger character in a way, where she was kind of the soldier, she was the one that was looking out for Bastian a lot of the time, even though she was the woman and obviously he was the man. I kind of like the fact that that was the case, where we do often see it being a kind of the gender norm way, where it would be the woman who would be in a more vulnerable position and the man protecting her. This was quite flipped, and it seemed to be that it was Grace protecting Bastian a lot of the time, and I did really enjoy that as well, while I did kind of wonder how at times how Bastian couldn't quite defend himself as easily. Like, he seemed to have a lot of powers, but at the same time he seemed quite weak as well, and it was just this kind of weird flip-flop between the two that I couldn't quite get my finger on. But it was still really interesting to read, and as I said, I really kind of like that gender swap of Grace being the dominant kind of caretaker in a way, in the security. There is a romance in this book between Grace and Bastian as well, and it's very obvious from the start. There is definitely a lot of chemistry between these characters that I did really enjoy. I kind of liked seeing it blossom. I think I would have liked it to have been a little bit more slow burn than it was, and I also was a little bit disappointed at times because I felt like the romance kind of overtook the main storyline for a while. I would have liked the romance, but I would have liked it to have been a little bit more in the backseat, and have the investigation, kind of the murder investigation that was ongoing, because there is someone who seems to be killing Mageborn, and that is one of the things that Grace is investigating, and I found that really, really interesting, and I kind of wanted to know more about that and less about the romance at times, and I felt like the romance kind of overtook some scenes that I wasn't ready for it yet. I do think the characters did gel really well, and it is always nice to read books where, you know, characters actually seem to have genuine chemistry between them, and I definitely felt that between Bastian and Grace, so I was happy for that. And because of that romance, I think this would be a really, really good book for people who are maybe have read a lot more romance and are trying to get more into the fantasy genre, and they don't really know where to start. I think this is a really, really good place for people to start with fantasy if they haven't read much of it before, because there is everything you love in a typical fantasy in this. It has all those building blocks of a really great high fantasy, but it also has those little nuggets of romance and sweet friendship that people who've read maybe just romance or contemporary books might enjoy as well. So this one would definitely be a nice kind of stepping stone to the very in-depth long high fantasy that could be very, very intimidating for other people. I think because of all those building blocks as well, where it pretty much has all the elements of a really classic fantasy. It has a really concrete world, it has a direction for the next book to go in. There are the history of both the kingdom and of the gods that they worship, and the lore of where the magic comes from and where the royal family get their power from. There is this deep lore there that everyone seems to know of. There are the hierarchies within the city itself, as I said, between the royal family, and then you have the kind of the thieves and the different heists and things that are all going on there that we kind of learn a little bit about but not loads about, but I think we'll find out more in the next book. And the next book is also kind of giving way to maybe seeing more of this world as well, which I think would be really exciting, because I feel like, as I said, there is quite a solid base there, and I think seeing more of this world and having more world building out of the main city that it's set in would be really great. So I think with all those kind of really great elements that are already in there, I think we have a really solid kind of start up to the next book, the sequel. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. So I gave this book a 3 out of 5 stars overall. I really enjoyed it, and as I said, I really recommend this one for people who haven't read a lot of fantasy before but are trying to kind of dip their toes into the world, and also for people who are reading fantasy and maybe want to see a fantasy with a little bit more romance in it, or just a really interesting magic system. I would definitely recommend this one because it was really interesting. Really interesting, it was fast to read, and yeah, I just really enjoyed my reading experience with it. So this book is actually out today, the day this review is going up. I'm sure it is available to buy wherever you buy your ebooks, and I would definitely recommend it. Let me know if you guys have read this book, if you're interested in reading the book, and I will see you guys again next time. Bye!